All right, here's how to read without getting distracted. So, for my reading experience, at around third and fourth grade, I got really into the Harry Potter series, like a lot of people, and reading came pretty easily to me because I was very interested in the series. I was having a lot of fun reading it, and I just burned through that series really easily. And I did deal with some distraction, as any third and fourth grade reader would. Like a lot of people, I would get lost into thought rabbit holes and then go halfway down the page and then realize that I didn't get any of what was going on. So I got really into that series, and then by middle school, I stopped reading for most of middle school. I read what I had to in English class, and but for a lot of the books, I was just looking up summaries and things like that. So I got back into reading about a year ago, and I'm reading mostly nonfiction. I reread Harry Potter 5. That was fun. And there were some other fiction books that I read that I enjoyed. But most of it was nonfiction. And fortunately, I cured a lot of the distraction that I feel while reading. And today I'm going to show you guys how I did that. So, some obvious basics on how to read without getting distracted. You need to read more, and that's pretty obvious because the more you read, the more you get the practice, and the more you get that practice, the better you will be at reading. So, this won't this won't really, I guess, remedy some of the fundamental issues you might have with your brain that will cause you to get more distracted while you're reading. But it'll give you that practice, which will allow you to read for longer, and just practicing reading will grow your attention span, which helps you focus for longer. And read things that interest you. Like when I was in third and fourth grade, I was far worse at actually reading than I was now, but I was locked in for that whole series. Why? Because I was super interested and I was just on the edge of my seat the whole time. I was willing to spend however long it took to read as long as I could get that plot because that's what I was looking for. And then another obvious basic is minimize distractions while reading. You're going to get this is less about the thought rabbit holes when you're reading, but more so about just things going on outside of the reading session that might pull your attention away. Like if your phone's going off, obviously it's going to be distracting. If maybe you like the aesthetic of reading in a coffee shop and you decide to go to your local coffee shop and you realize that it's actually not a very good place to read because everybody's walking around and ordering shit. But yeah, minimize your distractions. So, to get to the real tips that you might not have put into practice yet, tip number one, read in the morning. So, if you read in the morning, you'll reduce irrelevant thoughts while you're reading. So, this relates to like just if you have something to do or some interaction happened at work, some conversation, the less events that have happened before you start reading, the less you will think about them because they haven't happened yet, obviously. So, and this is different ways you can get lost in thought while you're reading. One of the ways is maybe you read something and that line triggers another series of thoughts that will get you to get lost and forget to read basically and pay attention. But in other ways, you'll just be thinking about something else. So if you're thinking about your chores or some conversation, if you read in the morning before any of that happens, you'll have less to think about while you're reading, less distraction. And you'll have less obligations, more focus. But however, you might not want to read as soon as you wake up because you'll be tired and you could fall asleep. So the chemical that makes us fall asleep, I guess the hormone, is called adenosine. It's like one of the sleepy chemicals. And you want to wait till you read or do some long form sitting down activity. You want to wait until you've kind of let that adenosine go down a little bit. So, caffeine blocks adenosine. It doesn't actually make it go down, but it will block it. And exercise removes adenosine, sunlight removes adenosine, and that means going actually outside and getting sunlight, which is a great habit for you to do in the morning anyway to wake you up. And exercise has the same effect. So once you get that done, I'd say maybe wait 30 minutes to an hour after waking up, even less time if you have caffeine. And then you'll be able to read and you won't be sleepy. And even if you don't fully fall asleep, you could fall into what's called micro sleep, where you kind of fall asleep with your eyes open. And you basically just have these split seconds where you just like your brain is completely unconscious. But yeah, and a bad thing, this is a side tangent, but a bad thing that can happen is if you're sleepy and you go drive, you can fall into micro sleep and then basically be driving while you're asleep and not realizing it. So yeah, that's awesome. Then, tip number 2, you want to make sure you're reading more actively versus passively. So, you guys should really do this. It'll actually help you a lot. So, in order to pay attention while you're reading or get less distracted, you want to make the process more active. So, a lot of times, if we're reading, even if it's a nonfiction book, we just kind of sit back and just absorb all the information or just let it kind of hit us. But if you're reading, if you want to pay attention while you're reading, especially if you're reading nonfiction and you're trying to learn from it instead of just fully immerse yourself in the story, you want to make the process more active because you don't want this all to just wash over. You want this information to actually stick in your brain. And also, if you make the process more active, you'll be able to pay better attention and stay in it longer without getting distracted. So, what you're going to want to do is just think about it like this. Instead of the author saying things to you, which would be like a monologue, you want to turn it into more of a dialogue between you and the author. So, a good way to do this is just annotate, and not the way that they teach you in school where you like write down themes and shit and motifs or whatever. Basically, what you're going to want to do is, if it's a nonfiction book, it's important that you're applying the information, which is the best way to learn. So, jot down ways that you could specifically use a piece of information in the book in your real life, even include like who you're going to use this information on. For example, if you're reading How to Win Friends and Influence People, write down the next scenario that you could be involved in where you could use a principle. Things like that. And just, you could write in the margins, or you could use sticky notes like these. These are kind of smaller ones. Or you could use these kind of sticky notes, which are bigger. If you're doing annotations, these are better. These I kind of more so use for bookmarks. And you're going to want to write down how you could use something, write down whether you disagree or you agree, and just make it more of a conversation with the author instead of just letting it all come at you. And something you could do is, in the margins, just write how you feel about stuff. And this could be applicable to fiction too. If you want to really make this book yours and really make it an experience to read something, maybe you could even draw pictures in the book. I mean, if you own the book, you could draw pictures. And if you don't want to damage the book, you could just do pictures or annotations on these sticky notes. And what that'll do is it'll really immerse you in the process and it'll make you kind of more active. So by writing things down, you're actually looking for stuff in your brain to write down. Kind of like, for me in school, I don't take notes because I plan on reading them again. I take notes because then I'm actually actively listening in class and I'm waiting for stuff to write down so that I can have an organized page or just something like that. So yeah, make it a conversation between you and the author. And the next tip is you got to have the right setup. Well, it's not entirely essential, but this could really help you stay in it when you're reading. So make sure you create a setup that's pretty comfortable and enjoyable. So whether you, have a blanket over you while you read, or you, I don't know, put your freaking reading shirt on or something, you, or you maybe you light a candle, you get your coffee, your pens, clean your room, clean your desk. You don't want it to be too distracting, but you want it to be comfortable and fun. So you don't want to sit on like you don't want to force yourself to sit on the floor or something while you read, because that'll just associate reading with your butt hurting, and you don't want to do that because you want to read. So avoid reading in bed, because it'll associate reading with sleeping, and then every time you try to read you'll fall asleep. And a lot of people, it's good to turn your screens off before you go to sleep, at least an hour. And a lot of people read during that time, and a lot of times they read in their bed. A lot of what that's going to do is just make you fall asleep earlier, because you're in your bed and you have this habit, you're going to fall asleep after you read, and it'll just make you super sleepy while you read. So sit at your desk, sit at a table, even just sit on a couch. It's important to just be upright while you're reading. And just create a setup like the list has shown that I went over, that you can repeat every time that you read, and kind of just get into the zone. Because basically, when you have a similar environment, it'll trigger your brain to get into the, okay, it's time to focus and read mode. And this comes from Deep Work by Cal Newport, is just ritualize your deep work session, or in this case, your focused reading session. So here's a tip for making the reading session fun. If you do reading, that's weird. If you read, at the same time as you, hold up, my dog. Oh wait, I gotta close my door. If you read at the same time as you do something that you enjoy, you're going to enjoy reading more because of what you associate it with. For example, if you really like coffee, just take out a book and read it every time you have coffee. And then you'll associate reading with coffee, and then it'll be fun, and you'll read all the time. And just associate reading with something you like. What I did when I started out reading is I had this practice balisong. A balisong is like a butterfly knife. I don't know if it's Chinese or something. I don't know if that's offensive. Um, yeah, I had this butterfly knife, and I like doing tricks on it and practicing, and I would just take it out and practice while I was reading. That might not have been the best because it took more attention to do that. I had the motions down, but like if I dropped it or something, that would just distract me a little bit. But that was something I liked doing, and it made me enjoy reading more. So if you can apply that to you, that's great, and it'll make you read more. And that's what we want to do. Tip number 4. I don't mean to get all self-improvement YouTuber, but a good way to read without being distracted is to practice mindfulness more frequently in your life. So some habits include meditation and journaling, or you could just practice mindfulness by doing anything, by going on a walk, hanging out with your family, and focusing on your breath, whatever. Just practicing mindfulness and being in the present moment. Meditation is the best way to do it. And I actually have there's some interesting stuff in here. Meditation for Dummies. Um, so maybe you should pick that up if you don't know how. But so meditation actually really helps with your mindfulness, because it builds that skill of realizing that you're lost in thought, which at the end of the day is what we're kind of trying to battle here. Is maybe you read a line and you get lost, and then you go all the way down the page. For example, say I'm reading this book. Say I'm reading this book, right? Deep Work. And I read all the way down to here, or I read something like this, and then I read, Ben needed to learn a hard skill and needed to do so fast. And then while my eyes are moving down this page, I start thinking about that line. For example, maybe I'm like thinking about what hard skill I need to learn. I was like, oh yeah, maybe I could learn how to program. Or I don't know, that would be pretty good, but maybe it'd be more fun to learn how to play guitar. Oh, I don't know. Programming would be kind of cool. I could start this project. Maybe I could start a tech company and like I get all the way to this page and I wasn't paying attention. So basically, if I was more mindful and I practiced meditation more, what would happen is I would maybe only be like, Ben needed to learn a hard skill or whatever. And I would read down like a couple sentences and then be like, oh, wait, I was just lost in thought. Let me go back. And then you spend significantly less time lost in thought and lost in those kind of rabbit holes, and you get way better at not getting distracted, or more so, getting distracted and snapping yourself out of it. And also, these practices will improve your attention span and your focus and presence. And that is the main thing. If you're more, think about it this way, if you're more present, you're less likely to get lost in thought. If you're more mindful, you are more likely to snap yourself out of it when you do get lost in thought. So it's just kind of defense on all fronts of that issue. So, some habits that will decrease your attention span in mindfulness are scrolling on any online platform. I call this the death scroll, where it's just kind of like infinite scrolling. Because if you think about how many people are making TikToks in the world, you're never going to reach the end. Even though TikTok says, like, oh, you've reached the end of your feed, I think that's bullshit. You never really reach the end. It just kind of makes you think that it's possible. But when you reach the end, when you're on those scrolling platforms, basically what it will do is it'll just decrease your mindfulness and your presence. More so your presence, because it just takes you way out of the present moment and you're just locked in on that screen, just like next one, next one, next one. And any short form content will also decrease your mindfulness and your presence. And this is because, and this will decrease actually your attention span more so, just because I mean, it's obvious. You probably heard something like this. All the content's short form, so everybody has the attention span of a goldfish nowadays. And this short form content basically it makes your brain used to receiving information in a very short amount of time, and those blocks of information, the shorter they are, the shorter your attention span will be. And when you're reading one book about one consolidated topic, think about that. If you receive most of your information on one specific topic on in a span of 7 seconds, even less if you're actually for real scrolling, like you'll be on that TikTok for less. If you're on one topic for 2 seconds, think about how it's going to feel when you try to be on the same topic for 30 minutes. It's going to feel horrible and it's not going to be easy. So, if you cut out these habits, if you cut out these habits, it'll increase your attention span and it'll make it way easier to read. And also, overstimulating content and activities, like anything that really spikes your dopamine, that feels really good, those instant gratification activities, like maybe eating McDonald's, watching TikTok, playing video games, anything of that sort, it'll spike your dopamine, decrease it, which will it'll spike your dopamine, which then leads to a dopamine crash, which actually goes below where you started. And that will result in depression and a lack of motivation, and it'll just make everything harder to do. And the less motivation you have, the less likely you are to stay in it because you're just gonna not be focused and it's just gonna suck. So avoid those habits, and it'll actually really impact how well you can stay in it while you're reading. So, one thing to note is that these habits, especially like scrolling on short form content like reels, shorts, this death scroll, is way more impactful than you think. For example, something I've discovered is 10 minutes of meditation does not cancel out 10 minutes of scrolling. If you scroll for 10 minutes, I'd say you need to do 20, 30 minutes of meditation and mindfulness practice to really cancel that out. Because it's just so overstimulating and just really takes your mind out of it. In order to get back into the present, I mean, think about that. If you're just if you take away your presence in the present moment, it takes a lot to get yourself back into that. So, if you cut out these habits, that's actually going to be more effective than adding in the good habits. However, it's harder to take out the bad habits than add in the good habits for a lot of people. So, just keep that in mind and just remember that it'll really help. All right, so that's all I have. So, in conclusion, basically, I'll just do a recap. You're going to want to cover these obvious basics first. Hold up, that's the garage door. You're going to want to cover these obvious basics first. You're going to want to read earlier in the morning, which will make you more focused. You're going to want to make the process more active by annotating and making it kind of more of a dialogue between you and the author. You're going to want to have the right setup, which is comfortable, enjoyable, and will get your mind in the zone. And you're going to want to try to make it fun so you read more. And practicing mindfulness will help you a lot with staying in the focused flow state while reading. So, I hope you guys found that helpful, and I hope you guys have a great day.